Welcome everyone to the first ever episode of Mentor Mind by Super Satang. Today we have Khun Win Thanapisitikul, which is a CEO at Supara Group and which is the owner of the leading tech apparel brand GQ in Southeast Asia. Supara Group also owns School Mass Pack and the Good Day Labs, which is a US-based direct-to-consumer kids apparel brand. Khun Win previously co-founded Pomelo Fashion, which is a leading international fashion e-commerce company that has raised over $80 million in funding from leading venture capitalists. Khun Win was also the managing director at Lazada.com, and he helped grow the company into becoming a key strategic piece of Alibaba's $2 billion acquisition of the company. And he began his professional career at Goldman Sachs, working across both investment and risk management divisions in New York and Hong Kong. Khun Win is also a former monk and wants to apply Buddhist teachings in business and loves solving everyday problems for consumers through innovative product design and loves enjoying the world and cooking as well. So it's a true foodie as well. So Khun Win, first question I have for you is, as a businessman, how did you start coming up with ideas, and how did you know which ones you would like to pursue and which ones were not worth pursuing?
Okay. Oh, well, nice to be here. Thank you, Krish, for the intro. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So which one to choose from or worth pursuing is it's quite important, actually. I think usually I would suggest I would like to, the stuff that is worth pursuing is the stuff that you like. I think that's really important. And something that you're good at. Something with, and then I think the other part I think that's really important is, it should be something with a purpose that you know why you want to do it. And another factor I would consider is, something that has an impact that you can make an impact on, either it be yourself, your family, society, at large, right? So I think it's really important that, you really figure something out that you like, good at, because it comes together. If you like something, you tend to be good at it, or vice versa, right? But to add a purpose and the why to it, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you mentioned that it's something that you want to add to society, because businesses nowadays, they're more than just profit, and having a social cause is really, really important. So if you don't mind me asking, what is your social impact cause that you live by, like your motto?
So I think most important for me is something that we do is impacting human lives, right? So one of the slogans we have for Supara Group is we make up men's apparel. We like to solve everyday's problem through life wearable solutions. And what we mean by that is, there's often a lot of problems that we have regularly that gets overlooked, and no one bothered to kind of deal with it. It might be small little problems, stuff as, shirt stainings, your collar, the back of your collar of your shirt is yellowing. It's been ongoing for, centuries, but nobody's really took initiative to deal with these little problems. But once you save them, you solve them, they actually can have a really meaningful impact from somebody else's lives, right? And what I mean by that is, you have folks who, really have to clean their shirts every day, launder them. How you can solve that for them and make it easier for them. It might be a small impact, but over time, every day that they have to do the washing, it actually makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because what we don't realize is that customer is definitely the most important person, and that like seeing what we can help improve their experience and their product experience and what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy is probably the most important thing, I think. So if you were a starting entrepreneur, how would you tell them, like, if they came up with ideas and constantly coming up with ideas? Because I face this problem as well. How do you know which ones are the ones that are going to be successful in the future, more than just what is interesting to them, and which ones are actually tangible and feasible?
I think that's a really hard question, to be honest, because there's a lot of ideas going around, right? And execution is probably the hardest thing, because everybody has many ideas, and it's all about kind of executing them, who does them well. I think you think about it, right? For example, when I started working at Lazada, e-commerce is a big trend that's coming into the region, Southeast Asia. It's been proven to work in the US, in Europe markets, right? And we do know that e-commerce works. The idea is there, right? And many people have those ideas. Everyone wants to, sell books online, sell electronics online. But the execution of the idea is really where it's difficult and hard and challenging because there is different ways to execute and there is no real like correct answer. There's a lot of kind of walking to the unknown, but execution is what's going to differentiate the person who lasts and the person that closes shots, right? So I think it's all about execution over just the ideas alone, or even if you have original idea, trying to do something very new. Chances are, unless it's like a very technical, highly required, like technical background and patented or copyrighted, right? There'll be a second mover who replicate your ideas that they also think is worth pursuing. So you really all come down to who has the best execution, and I think that's really what drives kind of a successful idea, right? It's not so much the idea itself, but the execution of the idea. And I think you might ask then, like, how do you execute ideas well? I think there's no shortcut, I would say, and it's a lot of work and persistence, patience, and persevering through it, right? If you don't have those three P's, so to speak, chances are you have to be either really lucky or you're caught in the right timing or just happen to sit on it and then it's a real fluke. But chances are that's not really replicatable. Rather, it is a lot of hard work you got to put into it to execute an idea well. And a lot of times when you start out your entrepreneurship journey, right, or your business idea you have, it always never plays out the way you initially imagined it. Because it's very different than imagining something, thinking about an idea, and then walking through that journey and executing it. It changes all the time. There's going to be hurdles you didn't think of because guess what? You don't know it, right? If you're coming up with the idea, it's still very new. You only can make assumptions and kind of, okay, I think it's going to go this way or that way. But as you kind of live it for months, for years, you really get to know more about it. So then what your original version started out with, usually, almost always, never pans out the way it ends up being. So I think that's why I think when you asked me earlier, right, like, how do you decide which idea is worth pursuing? I think the why is really, really important because without the why, along the way, you might be demotivated. You might face a hurdle that you can't overcome. And that's where the why really kicks in because if you know why you want to do this idea and you really believe in it and the why is still relevant even a year in, 3 years in, then that's what's going to really help you power through the ups and downs of your journey. So I think that's why I can't stress enough that you really need, before you jump into an idea, executing an idea, you really need to know the why.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, yeah, as you said, the business world is like anything could happen and it doesn't go as you expected. And it really takes, like, as you said, the three Ps, like it takes a lot of perseverance to go through that. And how would you say people should start like practicing that perseverance before they get thrown into the workplace or thrown into becoming an entrepreneur? And just like how do they start navigating that ambiguity when becoming an entrepreneur?
I think you can start small, right? I don't think it has to be a business related kind of practice, right? Like I think perseverance is common in any aspect of your life, right? So if you're in school now, I think one that you might not like school, you might not like the topic you're studying, but that doesn't mean that you can use that to kind of practice perseverance. Maybe pick the subject you fear the most or you do the worst in, right? And use that as a learning tool of, okay, I'm going to fight through this. I know I'm not gifted at it. I'm not super smart about this subject, but guess what? I'm going to force myself and really persevere through and do really well as best as I can. And I think that's more important than probably learning about the subject itself. Like I personally, frankly, I don't remember much about what I learned in school, let alone high school, right? But I think learning how to regulate yourself, being honest and disciplined about yourself, getting to the right outcome and kind of following through in school, that is a skill set that you develop and you can take with you even, in college, university, or even into your professional business life if you want to go into business or other pursuits as well, right? So I think that's a mindset. Even though you don't like this teacher, don't like this subject, you're not good at it, like if you can fight through it, that's a practice that then when you have to do something that you really like, you can still rely on this practice that you've built up over the years to persevere through. So it can start today. Or other habits too. It doesn't have to be at school. It could be, waking up early and or going to bed on time, but waking up early. The moment you wake up, what do you choose to do, right? Some people take the phone and start scrolling through it. Some people is like, actually, I'm gonna jump straight into the cold shower and go to the gym. Or some people might, I'm gonna read something interesting. So these are little small habits that you can really learn to kind of pick up and be disciplined about it. And that's where I think that being able to discipline yourself and regulate yourself is something that I think is a really amazing skill set that you can use over time, in your entire life, right? And the earlier you can do it, the longer you get to use it, right? Let's say, average life expectancy now is 80 years old in Thailand, just to throw a number. If you learn this skill when you're 15, you can use it for another 65 years, right? Versus you learn it in your 30s or 20s after, university or your first job, you might be able to use it for only 50 years. So I think this is where the earlier you can kind of adopt these things that, are useful, I think you might find them, pay off longer, right?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how you stated that being uncomfortable is really important, because even though if we don't enjoy it in the moment, like taking a really hard math class, or I'm not enjoying like subjects like languages, it really teaches us a lot, and it's something that we can use in our day-to-day lives, even if it's not in the business world. And
because in reality is you can't enjoy everything in life, right? Unfortunately, I don't think. I think it's very rare. I'm definitely not one in that camp. So learning how to kind of persist and persevere through something you don't enjoy necessarily is a useful skill. It's just practical. It's not something that, it's just very practical to have. And it also helps you build new capacity and capability because you have this practical skill.
I think that's extremely, extremely important. So talking about like perseverance, what was like the main challenges that you faced during your entrepreneurial journey, and what did that teach you, and what would you share to your younger self about that, and how would you advise to like maybe avoid mistakes or help build like things that maybe like you could have avoided, like problems you might have avoided? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe so. Let's say, Krish, I don't know how old you are now. You're 14, 15?
16.
Oh, sorry, 16, 17, right? It must be.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. But maybe let's say I to talk to myself when I was 17, so it's over 20 years ago. I would say what makes a really good entrepreneur qualities I wish I've had earlier or developed and emphasized is, I think, learning how to learn. I think that's the first one. So you go to school, I don't think it's so much about learning about learning about math, right? But I think what you really develop, if you look at it from a kind of zoom out perspective, is you actually learn how to learn new things. And I think if you really learn how to learn new things, and you can do that quickly. So any new subject, any new topic, right? And it's so much easier now in this day and age where, the internet just have all this information. You have so many form media that can teach you, right? Podcasts, YouTube, websites, blogs, even TikTok, you can debate about that, Instagram, all those things are content, right? And they are resource and information and knowledge. If you, of course, you got to, sift through it, make sure they're the right knowledge, they're credible and all those things, assuming you get that out of the way. Learning how to learn is a really important skill set because it allows you to accelerate what you learn, right? The speed you can learn new things, at which you can learn new things, and the ability to retain those new things that you've learned, and being able to identify and pick the right stuff to learn, quality of the content, and then most importantly, being able to bring it all together, synthesizing it. I think that's what I mean by learning how to learn. If you can master these skills, speed, quality, retention, and synthesizing them, then it's something you can carry with you. And the more you practice this, actually, the better you get at it. And the synthesizing it is actually quite exponential. As you learn more about different things and bring it all together, you're going to have new ideas that nobody else has. So that's one I wish I've really sit down and thought about it this way. And that means it's not just, it's so then you think of it that way, then even if it's a boring subject or something you're not so keen in, you can find as a challenge and fun and interesting. So I think that's a great way to kind of prep yourself to when you're learning something that you don't like. And then the second thing I would do is learning every day. A little bit at least. You don't want to keep doing the same things, and that's in your comfort zone. But if you're kind of, actually, I gotta do something or learn something new every day, and even it's a small amount, right? Like a 1% increase of what you have now, It's a very different. Somebody was telling me this powerful equation, right? If you're 1.00 to the power of 365 days, that result is 0% in anything, right? Because 1 to the power of 365 is 1. But if you're learning 1% a day, every day for a year, so that's 1.01% to the power of 365. The result is 3,778%. That's 37 times, right? What you started out at the beginning. But the point is, this is like a compounding effect that you have if you force yourself to learn something every day, and just a small amount, right? But make that into a habit. I think that's a really powerful statement or way to live when you're young, and frankly, till even you're old, right? And it really compounds exponentially over time. So that's, I think, learning how to learn that is an accelerant, make things faster, right? And then learning every day is a consistency. If you can do those two things, it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be literally a college student, but if you've done it earlier, right, you'll be a much more experienced college student than another college student or your peers. And then the third thing I would say is, for a good habit to get into is always ask questions. And that's part of the learning. It shows that you're inquisitive and you really want to learn something. And asking questions actually helps frame your mind to learn, because you're always trying to answer questions, right? So you got to ask the right questions, keep asking questions, ask the what, the why, particularly the why is really important, and the how. Those are the two things that you always continue to have. Why did this work? Why does it work the way it is, right? Why did this matter? And then how does it work? And why is the answer correct? You keep asking and digging in deeper and deeper, because as you do that, you really, hone in and get really, good at that topic or subject. So keep constantly asking yourself that. And part of that process is also challenging conventions and assumptions, right? If everybody say this is the right answer, but you don't know why or how is the right answer, you haven't really learned about it. But you're like, actually, let me ask this question and then really keep drilling into it. You actually might say, actually, I don't agree with that answer. Or actually, that answer only is true because these assumptions are true. And then you learn and you really get deep and you really understand it in a much more meaningful way. So I think if you can do these things, actually, this is a really good skill set to have as an entrepreneur, because then you can start asking questions or finding, the question will lead to problems that you think is worth solving, right? And that's like the gist of entrepreneurship is there's an existing problem in society or the world that you think is worth solving, and you're going to work your butts off to solve the problem. So it's really important that you ask a lot of questions, because then you really actually can differentiate between what problem is something that's worth solving versus others that are not worth solving. And the skill set of asking why and how constantly and iterating it over and over again will help you towards solving that problem. And that's really what, to my mind at least, what entrepreneurship is about.
Yeah, I think that is really cool to think about, because asking questions is something we might not always do because we are scared about what others might think of us. And I think something that we must do as if we want to become entrepreneurs or just up build ourselves is that we have to learn to not care what others might say, or learn to let go of our ego so that we can keep on learning more. So I think that's something really, really valuable and something that we can all implement in our lives, even in our school lives for those of us who are still young, and also in like college, but also during in our working lives and our business lives in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's really profound what you said, right? Because the more the less you care about how other people think about you, usually the happier you are.
Yeah.
Right? It's just less burden. Your life is already a struggle and a challenge and a lot of unknowns in life, right? And then to carry on other people's expectation or what they'll think of you, it's just add on additional stuff that you have to carry around, rather than just like, actually, I really want to do this. I know the why I want to do it. I'm very clear on it, and just go with it. That's like really keeps you focused and not worry too much about other people and what they think about it, because you know why you want to, right? You know what you're doing for what reason. So that purpose, I think, is really important. If you're really true and believe in that purpose, then I think what other people have to think matter less. And frankly, that is going to make life easier in general. I think, at least.
Yeah, I think that's vital because being an entrepreneur is always like so hectic, and it takes a lot of work. So just taking off that stress of thinking about what others think is really important. And also getting to the point of being an entrepreneur and how it takes up so much time. A lot of my peers had this question of how do you manage your time when you're an entrepreneur, and how do you know when to give time to yourself and when to give time to your business? Because ultimately being a business owner is something like your business is your baby, so you have to take care of it. But how do you know when you can take a break or take after look after yourself for a bit?
So I think that's important, right? I think two things. I, I this is my belief, right? And it might not be applicable to everyone, so please take it with a grain of salt. But if you're doing something that you love and you enjoy doing it, then the burnout usually doesn't happen, right? I think the burnout or you need a break really comes in when you're you're stressed, you're not enjoying it anymore, right? Like, just to give maybe a example, right? If you enjoy playing video games and you can make a living off video games as a professional e-gamer, I'm pretty sure those folks really can play like 15 hours a day nonstop because they're really enjoying it, right? And they get the results, right? But the moment you stop losing, you start not enjoying as much, right? The stress and all the pressure start coming in, then that's actually when you might be burned out. So it's not so much about, taking a break, or, it's making sure that you remind yourself, like, why you're doing this. What is the purpose? The why? Why do you gotten to this? Is that still relevant and true today? Have things changed and actually that why maybe doesn't resonate with you anymore? Right? If that's the case, you got to be honest with yourself, and maybe that's something that maybe it's no longer worth pursuing, right? But I hope you have the perseverance to go through a few ups and downs, because sometimes, you just got caught in the moment. So it's really important to come back to the why, revisit it, be really truthful and honest about yourself. Am I just tired now, so the why is less relevant, even though actually I still believe in it? And then maybe the why, then thinking about it, recharges you and remotivate you, or actually the why is no longer relevant, and maybe it's not the right why, so therefore I shouldn't be suffering through it. So I think it's really important to remember the why, and then I think the second part is, you know entrepreneurship never ends, right? Owning a business never ends. It's not like when you're a professional, when you go clock in, you finish your work, finish your project, you're done. When you own something, like you said, it's your baby. That doesn't go away. So, and you got to think about it all the time. So then I think, and then it's switched. Instead of, I need a break, it's actually more of, I need to be able to manage my energy,
Yeah.
right? In the morning, usually, if you're a morning person, you wake up after a good night rest, you're full of energy, you can drive, you can deal with stuff much better. But if your energy is down, then maybe take a break, relax, do something to then bring the energy back up and go back to it. So it's more about regulating your energy throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. Than I think to be like, well, I need a break. I think it's just learning, and then it's self-regulation. I think that's where you're gonna learn and then no one can tell you, hey, Chris, you can only do, you should only work 4 hours a day, 4 hours a week. I think it's different for different people, and it's also different for what you're doing. If you're enjoying it, you can do it 12 hours a day, right? If it's not going to cause your health to deteriorate, and it doesn't cause your family members to be upset, then why not? If you love it, right? But I think it's really about remembering the why, and regulating energy and being very truthful and honest about to yourself, that is the why still relevant to you today.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about that. We have to do things that we love so we don't have that burnout, because if we don't do the things we love, then we won't enjoy. The stress comes, then the problems come. But if we have that persistence because we're doing the things we love, and also have all the perseverance training that we had, like as you said, in our schooling lives and in our day-to-day lives, and being comfortable to be uncomfortable, I think that is vital. So we're gonna talk more about the financial aspect and financial literacy, because that is what Super Satang is about. The This podcast is called Mentor Mind by Super Satang, and Super Satang wants to raise awareness about financial literacy for the youth. And we want to know how you started with your financial literacy journey. And by that, we want to know what your key money habit is. So before you start investing, before you go into business, what is your key money habit in saving for the future and building wealth for the future?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I'm glad you asked the question, right? Because I think it's really important, and it starts really young, right? That habit. So I always enjoyed doing business. So my first business quote unquote venture was in middle school, where I used to buy and sell Magic the Gathering card. I don't even know you know that anymore. It's like a gaming card.
Oh wow.
Magic the Gathering. It still exists today. Price has gone up quite a bit actually. So funny that I didn't realize. I've been kind of shocked that my collections are worth a lot more than used to be. But it was really my first venture into kind of business world, where I was buying and selling on eBay. So I would buy from the U.S. Magic cards that are priced down because people can't use it to do competition anymore, because they want to sell new cards, new series. So, price are really, so the new stuff are more expensive than the old cards. But in Thailand, because we didn't have access to the old cards are more expensive, more scarce than the new cards, right? So what ended up being is an arbitrage, right? Where I buy from the US through eBay. Back in the day, eBay is still very new. And then been mailing it to Thailand and selling it in Thailand. And then I took some of the new cards in Thailand and sold it on eBay to the US customers. So that's kind of my first money habit, is making money and learning how to make money, finding trading arbitrage, buy and sell. And then over time, I think it becomes more about savings and investing. Because as you learn to make money through business, you know the value or the amount of work you have to put in to make money. So you don't spend it on stuff that's not meaningful, right? And then when you have leftover money, then you can start learning to invest and putting money to invest, so that money, hopefully you do it correctly, grows over time. But frankly, investing it's not like you invest, you're guaranteed to make money. Actually, most people, I think, invest and lose money, but it's a good learning curve that you're gonna have to go through, kind of earning the stripes, so to speak, right? You're gonna invest, you're gonna make some losses, maybe you make some good investments too. But hopefully over time, as you get more and more experience, you learn to be a better investor. But my money habit really is, run the business, try to make money out of it. Because of that, then you see the value of money. And saving is very important, because, and I don't save to spend on a big ticket item like a watch, a car, a house. I save so that I have money to start new businesses, right? And because that's what I enjoy, doing businesses. And the saving goes towards that, and then actually after a while, the savings might then go towards investing. But I think the more important thing about money habit is the mindset, right? Like, it's always, somebody told me, it's always harder to make the first, let's say, 1 million buy, right? But it's the second million, the third million, the fourth million is much easier. Why is that? That's like an observation that I read an article somewhere that's what they identified. And I think that what the article said, and I thought it made a lot of sense to me, is actually the reason the first million is really hard to make is because you need to learn a certain mindset, learn a certain process and behavior and self-regulation to make your first 1 million. And it's a lot of trial and error, learning about yourself and all that stuff. But once you kind of have that mindset and behavior system, then it's much easier to get from 1 million to 10 million, so to speak, right? Because you know how to do it. It's just now scaling that behavior. So I think that's kind of how about financial literacy is. Of course, you want to be financial literate, and financial literate is not just learning about okay, profit and loss. What does this mean? Debt, equity, and all that stuff in the accounting set. I think financial literacy is also a set of behavior and mindset that you need to kind of learn, right? To learn to, to buy things and think about what you buy, if it's worth the money or not, right? How do you do with your savings? And can I live like that, right? What is the purpose of buying that, I don't know, watch or car? Is it something that's going to bring a lot of gratification for you? Or is it just to show to your friends and to be part of a larger group to fit in, right? So it's like, I think that's where I think financial literacy is quite important. It's also a behavioral set, not just the literal sense of balance sheets, equation, profit and loss, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. And one of the things that I heard you say was like, which I thought was really cool to think about, was the fact that people save to buy like a high ticket item, like you said. And I think this is a problem that it's been like going on for years and years, because we've been trained to do that. Like our parents might have said, save up for your new Xbox or save up for your new phone. And like this is a huge problem, because people are just saving and then blowing it all on something that just might not give the return or the like make money for them, and they're not using their money to make more money. So how do you think that the youth can start changing this bad habit of theirs?
I think so. It comes back to what utility you get out of it, right? The why. I think that if you're saving up to buy an Xbox and you know why you want that Xbox, and if that why is something that really resonates with you, then I think maybe buying the Xbox is not a bad thing. So what is a potential why, right? So if you're saying you're buying the Xbox, you want to be a professional e-gamer, and you think you're talented at it, then maybe Xbox is a great investment. But if you're buying the Xbox because your friend has it, you don't really gonna play that much or use it that much, you don't really enjoy it that much, you just wanna play with your friends, then maybe that why is not as meaningful. So it really comes down to knowing why you buy something. What do you buy it for? Not just following somebody else because other people have it, therefore you have to have it. That's not a good enough why. And I think that's a really important behavior that kind of develop, right? And really hone in, right? Is always asking why you're doing something. Why am I buying this? Okay. And then if you're like not sure and you're still like, I don't know, deep down, it's like maybe I shouldn't buy it, but I really want it. And maybe it's just like, okay, why don't I take 3 days to think about it? And if I come back and revisit that in 3 days and I still really want it, or have more clarity why I want to buy this, then sure, then maybe it's that, then you'll be easier to make that decision, right? But if it's in 3 days, you're like, I actually don't really need it, I didn't really want it, or I don't really have a good answer, then maybe you don't need to buy it. So knowing why you do something or why you buy something, I think just as important, if not more important, than the physical act of buying something.
Yeah, I think that is very, very valuable advice, because like taking that 3 days that you said, like could like the first thing you learn in economics is there are unlimited wants and limited like supply. But this is just something that all humans have, and something we must control, because we don't all have all that money to spend and spend and spend. And I think it's very valuable to regulate and know what is actually going to bring use, what is actually going to yield the most happiness, the most returns. And I think it's something really, really crucial. So what do you think is the number one thing that the youth should start doing in terms of being financially literate?
Yeah, I think maybe keeping track of what you spend, right? So have your own personal balance sheet. I don't know if you're familiar with balance sheet, but it's really like profit and loss, right? Like how much you spend, what assets you have, how much savings you have, right? And how much additional income you plan to make. So like just kind of doing the basic arithmetic on, how much potential money you think you're going to get over the next year before you spend, right? So you know exactly that's kind of what I'm expecting to have by 12 months. And I want to buy something now. Okay, that's going to deduct from that amount. So I'm going to end beginning of the year, I will start with a number. And by the end of the year, this is the number I'm expected to end with. And because if you have that, at least you're like conscious, right? You're not just buying out of impulse. Like, okay, my friend got an Xbox. I want to play Xbox with my friend, so I'm gonna get one too, right? It's that's very impulsive. You see it in a snapshot, in a moment in time. That decision is made, rather than you want that Xbox in that moment in time. Now you zoom out and you look at, well, okay, but I started the year with 100 baht. If I buy it, I might end up the year actually at zero. And is that something I really want? Maybe it is. Then you can go ahead and buy it. But maybe if you zoom out and see the entire context of it, how this decision in this moment will affect the larger context, then you might have a different view. So I think it's really important to zoom in and zoom out as you are, given all these stimulation and impulses.
Yeah, and that is really, really helpful because I think the key thing that you touched upon was the habits that we have and how we keep track of those habits and building these good habits of keeping track, deciding whether or not to buy something and taking that time to think whether or not it's actually worth it is very important, like, quote unquote, practice, because in the future, we're definitely going to have to do this when we're adults. This is a huge problem because if people, like so many adults now in society, don't know how to keep track of their expenses, that's why there's like so much debt. So these habits are so important to start like now, because to like prevent those issues. And I really thank you for that advice. So another question we have, and is something that a lot of my friends have been wondering, is that once we start working, we are fresh into the workplace and we earn our first paycheck. What should we do with it? May I ask, what did you do with your first paycheck?
Yeah, of course. I think it's symbolic, right? First paycheck, because hopefully that's not going to be the only one. You can keep your job and continue or whatever you end up doing, right? But I think it's quite symbolic. For me, what we did is I used my first paycheck to buy a vacation for my parents. It's probably not the best use of money from a return on investment standpoint, but a return on happiness and joy, I think it's very high because your parents, they send you to school, they spend a lot of money from you to school. For you to like think of them after you made your first paycheck, I think that means the world to them. And no amount of money, could be $100, $1,000,000, $100 million, would probably give them the same amount of joy just knowing that their child has thought and cared. First instinct was to give back to them. So that's a very high return on happiness over a return on investment. And I think it's a very reasonable thing to do because money by itself is nothing, right? It's just an object. Why people want to accumulate money and build up wealth is because, okay, they can use that money to, enjoy or create experiences or happiness. So money is just an intermediary. It's not the final product or end product, right? So I think it's really important that we shift the mindset from maximizing income or money to maximizing the return on happiness or the end product. Because, if you focus so much on the intermediary, like money, it never ends. It's never enough. Unlimited needs and wants, right? Like that's what you said. When that's going to be enough? But if you're like, well, actually, I want to be happy. I want to be happier. I want to maximize my happiness, not just me, but my family or people that is important to me, my relationships. Then I think you're gonna find a lot more meaningful in your life than just making a lot of money. But there's a lot of articles out there that I know there's a research person who spoke to hundreds of really elder 80-year-old plus last chapter of their lives adults and asked them what would they tell themselves, or how do they define success, or what makes them happy? And I think most of them don't really talk much about the amount of wealth they have or the career they have, the professional career. But most of them find happiness in actually relationship with people, their family, their friends. That's what's going to define their happiness and what they care most about at the end of their life. So I really like to spend a lot of time with older people because they're able to condense and give you an experience that you haven't experienced and share that with you. So you have a perspective that probably can't be imagined without spending time with them. I mean, I'm not sure if your grandparents are alive, but they're a great place to start, or even great grandparents, right? Because they've been through a lot. And I think they give a very different perspective than what I could give or what your peers would give.
Yeah, I think that first of all, that was really, really selfless of you to do that. And as you said, it's symbolic, the first paycheck, and giving that back to your parents. It's something that brings them happiness and gives then you happiness. And I think that's something really important to note, that there must be a balance as well. Like, not everything is just about gaining like returns from investments, from your paycheck, from your business, but also having that return on happiness, as you quote unquote said. And it's something that we should think about. And also your perspective on elder people, I think that is something that's really interesting, because also when I talk to my grandparents, and my grandpa in particular, he always talks about how spending time with family is definitely the most important thing. Building those experiences, relationships, and having a good time is also important. So I think it's just very important that everyone knows that they must have a balance between happiness, money, and just life as a whole. Life is should be a balance.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for your time today and valuable advice. I definitely learned a lot today, and it was a really really nice session. Very nice talk. Lots of valuable feedback and general thought processes that we can now implement in our lives, and models that we can use and start uplifting ourselves to become better business people, better financially literate, and just better people in general. And I thank you for your time today. Thank you so much.
Of course, you're welcome. Thank you, Chris, and thanks for having me.